Hey, we're back. We just continue to show up in your inbox. My name is Jeff Harrison, along with
Leslie Spohr.
This is the Twisted, Bent, and Exhausted Entrepreneur Podcast. Because it's such a mouthful, I've made sure to put it on the screen because 9 times out of 10, I'm not getting it right. And maybe because I'm one of the twisted, bent, and exhausted, or one of those pieces, and it's hard to get it right. So
Leslie, we've only been doing this for like ever. So I don't know why you get it right.
Yeah, I think this is episode 36 or 37 now. And so that means almost closer to a full year than a beginning of the year. So great job on that, because, you know, here's a fun statistic. Most people who start a podcast quit after the 7th episode.
They do? Why would they do that?
It's just they run out of things to do. Life gets in the way. You know, the typical thing. They're trying to do this as a side hustle, and they look at this, well, I'll get to it next week. And it just doesn't happen. Next thing you know, a few weeks go by and they're done with 7. That's why anyone who comes to my company and says, hey, I want to start a podcast, I generally say, let's pre-record 5 to 7 episodes in advance before you ever get started, and find out if they have that in them. And if they say no, then I'm just not going to go there. So because otherwise
well,
it's
that's
a waste
kind of
of their time and
narrow-minded.
money. Well, so the data proves it out. So there,
right.
The videos and podcasts and whatever you want to do, there's what's it say? Hell is paved with good intention, but it didn't get done.
Yes.
Anyway,
what are we talking about today?
Well, I want to talk about something that just recently happened. I'm going to call it When to Go Pro.
Like the camera?
No. Okay, maybe let me just change that. Hold on a second. Hold on.
I did this all yesterday in our BNI group. Yesterday.
When to go from a W-2, in other words, an employee, to an entrepreneur. When to step out of that and say, hey, you know what? I want to do it myself and go out there. And, Leslie, I think there was a day when we were younger, when we were first starting out, being an entrepreneur was almost like, are you kidding? Why would you do that? Why would it was almost taboo. It was like,
I got asked that question, actually.
Yeah, get yourself a job. And now it's kind of sexy. Like, you mean you still work for somebody? Why don't you start your own business? And I don't know if it's just me. Do you hear that?
I do, especially when I first started, because I was a consultant in the aerospace industry, and I was making 6 figures 20 years ago, which now is not as impressive as it was 20 years ago, but I was making good money. And when I decided that I felt compelled to start my own business. So when I did it, my son-in-law, I'll never forget, that's one of the first things he said to me is, why are you doing this? I got to travel all over the country. I had very little expenses at the time because I was living in Virginia intentionally, because my whole outgo was like $1,200 a month, mortgage, insurance, utilities and everything. And I was making good money. So I had a great life. And he was like, why would you give that up? And I'm like, I just need to do something myself.
Yeah.
And we'll get to this, I'm sure, but we'll talk about the difference of starting a business that's creating a job for yourself, right? And creating a business. That's two different things. Both are really good, but they're two different things.
Yeah, I think I want to talk about the fact that, like, and I'll give you a very specific case study that I'm dealing with right now, and my heart is bleeding for this gentleman, and I'm like, how can I help him? And so I'm more talking about, hey, you know what? You've just gotten sick and tired of your job, and you jump into the deep end of the pool and you don't really know how to swim. You're a long ways from the edge. You don't have any floaties on. You're in Levi jeans with big boots. In other words, all the odds are against you. And what I want to talk about today is really setting yourself up for a successful transition, not one that is failure. And we were talking offline. I said, we can all visualize that restaurant. And I'm not picking on restaurants, but you can all visualize a restaurant that opened up and then 6 months later it shut down. And I would say the reason for that is, most of the time, not every time, sometimes there's some extenuating circumstances, but most of the time, Leslie, is because somebody told somebody in that particular restaurant, wow, you ought to open up a restaurant. You're such a good cook. So they go in having that skill set, but they have nothing else as far as business acumen and payroll and
Right.
ordering and ROI. But more importantly, they have no financial basis to get in there. So they're going in there on 100% borrowed money, which is tremendous pressure versus a path that I'd like to talk about today that I think would be a whole lot better for you.
Yeah, I see a lot of people who don't prepare. I don't know if I've told this story on this podcast, but I've told it a lot when I'm working with people. And that is, I met a lady at a chamber mixer one time who was all irate because she had opened a business, some kind of a retail business, hung out her shingle and had a ribbon cutting even, and nobody showed up. And, that's a lack of prep. You people just don't flock to you because you start a business unless you're somebody who's really, really famous and you have built a brand awareness or a reputation. It just doesn't happen, right? It takes a lot of marketing, what I'm trying to say. You need to look at the market, make sure you're positioned strategically, know what your plan is. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes with this for preparation, but tell us your story that you're dealing with right now.
Yeah, I want you to think about what Leslie's talking about. What we're going to talk about is most of the time people jump in and they try to start a fire and they're using wet wood and it's just not going to work. And they don't have any kindling. There's nothing to start the fire with. There's nothing. And then they fail because, they can't get the wood started because it's wet. So I want to give you two examples. Yesterday was Monday. I get a call from someone and says, "Hey, Jeff, I have somebody I want to refer to you. And he's in the HVAC industry. And he wanted to do business with me, but we don't offer that service anymore." Now, the service was, I know it's going to blow if you have a toupee on right now, not you, Leslie, but if you're listening, it's going to blow your toupee off, is they wanted to put an ad in the phone book.
Nuh-uh.
Yeah.
In 2025?
2025. When we're recording this is October of 2025, and this was October 2025. This gentleman who was starting in the HVAC business wanted to put an ad in the phone book. And this gentleman told him, "Hey, we don't do the phone book anymore. In fact, we're doing our last phone book, and it's already closed. We already passed the deadline, so we're not going to ever do it again because it's a wasted time and money." That's
why did he want the phone book?
I'm getting to that.
Okay. All right. Sorry.
Okay. So anyway, so he said, so I called him and I said, "Hi, this is Jeff and blah, blah, blah. And you were referred to me by so-and-so. And he said, I could probably help with your marketing. And because I do digital marketing, meaning online, I don't do the phone book. And the phone book is no longer going to be publicized and distributed. And it probably isn't your best use of your time and money anyway." He says, "Well, tell me about what you do." And I said, "Okay." So I told him about what we have. And he's like, "Oh, that sounds great." And I said, "You get all this for X number of dollars a month." And he says, "Whoa, you do all of this every week for $7.99 a month?" And I said, "Oh, no, sir." I said, it's only $799 a month. And you could almost hear him having to bend over and pick up the phone he just dropped. Because he said,
which is super cheap for what you do.
Oh my gosh, ridiculously cheap. I just did a presentation like you saw yesterday. If you went out and did what I do, because we've automated and used artificial intelligence, it would cost you like $4,200 to do what we do a month.
Right.
I was offering $799. I thought, hey, this is helping this guy. Sounds like he's starting his business. He says, "Oh my gosh." He says, "There's no way." He says, "That's every month?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "I can't afford it." He said, "I'm just starting out. I don't have any money." And he said, I said, "Well, let me ask you something." I said, "Do you have a Google Business Review?" And he says, "What is that?" Or a Google Business Profile. He says, "What is that?" Now, folks, that's free. He didn't even have that. I said, "Well," I said, "Do you have a website?" "Oh, no." He says, "I can't afford a website."
How's he starting an HVAC business?
And I said, "Well, do you have any social media accounts like Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube?" He says, "I don't even know what those are."
How old was this person?
Well, he sounded like, here's the thing. I know most of you think I'm probably in my mid 30s, but I'm 65 years old and this is not foreign to me. So this is a gentleman starting a business. And, you know, again, my heart went out to him and I said, listen, I said, maybe this isn't a good fit. He says, well, I just need some help. And I said, he said, but I just can't afford that. He said, I was going to do the phone book because I could do it for $150 a year. Do you have anything like that?
That should tell you right away.
Yeah. And I said, listen, his name is Mike. I said, Mike, I said, listen, if you had to do anything right now, because you're a local business. He says, well, I service all these areas. Of course, he's in our area, so he's servicing multiple cities. But I said, you need to have a presence at least online. So if somebody looks for air conditioner repair or installation in your area, in their area, you have a chance of showing up.
Right.
So he said, well, how much is that going to cost? Well, I don't normally do that as a one-off. But again, my heart is bleeding. I'm like, okay, it's $295. And I thought, if he can't afford $295, I'm going to have a mysterious disconnect from the call.
A mysterious disconnect.
And he's like, is that every month? I said, no. I said, Mike, I said, it's a one-time charge, but I would recommend that you also hire us on an ongoing basis and we'll update it for you. And he says, well, how much will that cost? I'm like,
oh my gosh.
I'll get it. I said, $50. He said, a month? I said, yes. He says, oh, I can't handle it. I can't do that. But he said, I'll do the $295. He said, can you send me something like a contract and I'll pay you? I said, okay. So then that was Monday. So Tuesday he calls me back late in the day because I haven't received the contract back yet. He says, Jeff, he said, I'm so sorry. He said, I can't seem to get it to open up in my phone. I've got a really old phone and it won't let me download attachments. And I'm like, do you have a computer? No, I don't have a computer. I said, do you have an iPad? No, I never really got an iPad. I just have this old phone. And I'm like, he's unprepared to go into the world of business. Because here's the thing, guys. In our area, and call me out if I'm wrong, Leslie, in our area, HVAC is incredibly competitive. So if you're starting out and you don't have money for an updated phone or a computer, and you were going to advertise in the phone book, there's some problems there. But I just felt bad for him.
How's he going to have the equipment needed to do a service on an HVAC or repairs or whatever?
That still has my mind boggled. I don't know, but I'm going to meet him. I'm going to meet him today at 2:00 this afternoon, because he has no way to send me the money. He's going to
don't tell me he's going to write a check. Oh, okay.
No, he's going to pay me cash and then give me the data I need to create his Google business profile.
It's a waste of his money, Jeff.
It is. There's a part of me, I'm like, well,
don't take it.
Because here's what's going to happen. He's going to run into somebody else and they're going to really take advantage of him. So out of all the things that he could do, this is the one that may have the best chance to help him a little bit, because it's
his Google account.
His Google account.
Yeah. I know
that's a lot to take in.
I'm flabbergasted. It's 2025 right now. Hopefully people will be watching this. It'll be 2026 or 28 or whatever. But I'm just flabbergasted. You know, I went yesterday. This is kind of along the same line. I went yesterday to get my business cards designed because I've had the same ones for 15 years. And now we have a new, it's not exactly new, but a different look to our logo. I want to put the QR code on there. You know, I want to update some, and I want to make the font bigger because I can't read it. So I mean, my own business card, I can't read because it's too small. So I go to get it redesigned, and I'm talking to, my guy's name is Mike also, as it turns out, Mike at my graphics place. And I said, you can move the contact info and stuff however you want. And he goes, well, I said, you don't need to put the fax number on there. He goes, nobody uses fax anymore. I said, you would be surprised. I still, to this day, and my fax is an electronic fax. It's not a fax machine, right? I give somebody a number and it sends me a PDF, whatever they send me. But I still, to this day, get photos of receipt books as invoices facts to me.
Insane.
That's, to me, that's not a real business. I mean, it's like you have, I mean, I'm not saying you have to have the latest and greatest technology, but you are not competitive in this world where somebody has it and you don't.
That's right.
Right. I mean, and even, we give our employees company phones. Why? So they have the latest and greatest technology, because sometimes they can't afford it themselves.
Yeah.
So I want them to have stuff that they can work on, and it makes sense, that they can attach images and open images and things like that.
Well, imagine,
So,
Leslie, if you decided, hey, I'm going to be a firefighter, and you go into that particular fire station and you're called out on a fire and you have no equipment to fight that fire. You don't have the cool cap. There's no there's no Dalmatian. There's no Dalmatian. There's no gloves. There's no fire protection gear. You don't even have a hose. I'm sorry, that house is going to burn down and you're going to have 3rd-degree burns.
That sounds like a personal problem.
Oh my gosh. So my point is this is what I was talking about, is what path can be taken to improve your success to be an entrepreneur? Because listen, we talked about this before. Entrepreneurship now is kind of sexy. It's the new, hey, I'm going to get a job. I'm going to be number 2 at Google. Now, being an entrepreneur is the way to go. More and more people are doing this, but statistically, when you open up a new business, Leslie, what do we talk about? What happens in the first year with those? If we had 100 businesses open up, what's the percentage of success?
About 10%. I mean, maybe it's a little higher than that, but because I don't remember the current statistics. But a lot of people think they can start a business and they don't understand. And market research was the thing I was trying to say before. They don't understand what it takes to run a business. And you see all these articles about starting a business on a shoestring and blah, blah, blah. And people believe that. And it's not true. It is true that you do not have to go get a big business loan to start a company. It depends on what you're starting, right? Yep. But because if you have to invest in inventory or you have to invest in signage and things and you have to have a physical brick and mortar place, then yes, you need more capital to start a business. You do not necessarily need that much capital, but you do have, there's certain things you have to have, right? You have to have marketing collateral, and that's both printed and digital, right?
Well, can I take us back before this ever happens? Because you're talking about, hey, I've already jumped off the cliff. I need to make sure I have a parachute.
You want to talk about the mindset of a business owner?
No. I want to talk about it of saying one day in your mind, you say, I'd like to own my own business someday. And let's use this as an example as an HVAC. And I say, well, how much experience do I have as an HVAC? Well, I have none. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to then go to work for an HVAC company,
right? Get
trained and understand how this business works. And I might invest 3 to 5 years of my life as an apprentice, doing all this stuff, and realize, wow, there's a lot of moving pieces. There's the truck, there's the parts, there's somebody's got to be answering the phone, there's customers.
You have to learn how to diagnose issues. Yeah.
All of this stuff. And then while I'm an apprentice, I'm asking questions to the business owner. Wow, and how much this would cost to start this up? Well, you have to have a truck, at least one truck, and you have all this equipment. So you need at least, let's just use a number, $75,000, at least in a loan or money to start the business. Holy cow. Okay. So in that 5-year period, you know what I'm doing? I am putting every dollar I can away in a sock, and I'm working on my credit. In other words, I'm socking it away. That's how that started. I'm socking it away.
Is that how that started?
It did today. I'm socking it away. And what I'm doing is I am being an apprentice, not just for the HVAC company, but I am gleaning as much as I can from those owners who own that particular business to be prepared to go out into the real world. So it doesn't catch me off guard.
Well, yes. I mean, I do.
And here, that's okay. I want to share something with you that this is something that I think makes sense from a standpoint of back in the day when I was a golf professional. We had to become an apprentice. And the
Right.
apprenticeship took about 3 to 5 years. In that period of time, our head professional would teach us every aspect of the business, and we would have to then be in charge of that part of that business. And we'd have to get certain grades and understandings of that before we went to the next part. The point was, is when we were graduating from that, he could then confidently say if a job came opening for a head professional, that we were actually qualified to do it. Not just enthusiasm and, hey, I can hit a ball 300 yards, but I can run a golf shot up. I can take care of the membership. So that's why I think some kind of, when I say apprenticeship, it just means working in that industry and let somebody else pay for your education and understand what it really takes. Because a lot of times as an employee, Leslie, I think we only see the superficial level and we're thinking, this is easy, I can do this on my own. And all of a sudden you're going, holy crap, right?
Right. But
So
both my grandsons are doing that. One's an electrician who apprenticed for quite a while, and the other one is a heavy equipment operator, and he also apprenticed. And that's really true in the trades. HVAC is a trade, so I agree with you in the trades. But when you get into more of a business related job like retail, or I mean, you need to understand inventory management, you need to see operations, so there's still learning that goes on. Is it true still today? Because I've been out of school for a very long 50 years, out of school for a very long time.
that's a
So I
long time.
hadn't, I know everything is a 50-year anniversary this year for some reason. Yeah, so when I was going to school, I wanted to be either a nurse or an X-ray technician. I kind of had those on my radar. But what happened was, I at the time I couldn't afford. I had 2 scholarships too, and I couldn't afford the books for school at the time. So I got a job, and the job then took me down a completely different path. I never made it to medical except for the year I worked in a nursing home, but I never made it to medical. And I ended up getting business management experience, which has served me well. Is it still true today that kids go to school and have an idea they're going to do one thing and then fall into something different because they got a job? That's what I'm curious.
I think
Do you think?
so. Yeah, they say right now, this generation coming out of college, you're having the most challenge of any generation before them, of being able to say, "Hey, I have this particular education and this degree. I can't find a job in that area, and I do something different." And again, to me, that's preparation as well, and the fact that the world is changing so rapidly. I think that's true. And what you're saying is, I don't disagree with. If, like, as an example, my younger sister, who became an in-home healthcare practitioner, she didn't start out doing that. She was in a retail business. My mom became very ill. She took care of her and then went into education. And through that education that somebody else paid for, and her licensing, then she opened her business, but she didn't do it blindly because somebody says, "Oh, you're really good at taking care of people. You ought to open up an home care business." No, she didn't do that. She got her feet wet and her training on someone else's dime. And that's all I'm saying is the first step, in my opinion, is you should then say, if you're going to, now you're a unique case, because what you opened up, your company called Executive Arrows, it didn't exist. So
Right.
you were a pioneer with a lot of arrows in their back, but you made it through, right?
Yeah. When I started the business, this industry, the lifestyle management industry, did not exist at all. I spent the first 3 years, and we just celebrated our birthday. We just started our 20th year. So,
Not 50.
I argue that because, I don't need to have the discussion about age, but because I always think, are you one on the first day that you went through a whole year to be one, or are you nothing until you get to that? It doesn't matter. It's just a weird.
Well, if
paradox.
you think about a baby,
It's a paradox.
we talk about it in months until they become at least a year old. Oh, they're
Right.
9 months old, they're 8 months old. So maybe the same thing with business. So you don't actually become a year until the 366th day, as long as it's not a leap year, right?
Yeah. So we started our 20th year just this week, but I spent the first 3 years educating potential clients and business leaders out here in the desert what this was and why they wanted to use it. And, and I was very, very blessed. And then I picked up clients relatively easily. Everybody recognized the need for this type of service. And it turned out that, I don't know if this is a segue or not, but it turned out that a couple of people had tried to do this business in the past, but the admin of it overwhelmed them and they were unable to continue, which is why I started my software development the first year I was in business, because I recognized the admin portion of this and how important it is. I tell people all the time, we're not really a lifestyle management company so much as we are a data management company, right? We're managing schedules, we're managing tasks, we're managing vendors, we're managing invoices, we're all this stuff for clients we're managing. And so I recognize the importance of the data. Now, this guy that you're talking to, your example that made you crazy this week, which I'm surprised it's today, and I hadn't heard about this already.
I've been on medication.
Do we know why he's trying to start an HVAC company?
I don't know that yet, but I'm going to ask him today when I meet him out in the middle of the desert to get cash from him. Like, why is he doing this?
Yeah, why did he pick this?
And and here's the thing:
it is a huge investment.
It may be one of those things where he did work for somebody for a long time. Maybe that business went out of business and he was forced to do this, and that was like his only thing. I get that. That's extenuating circumstances. But I want to go back just for a little bit in your story and ask you this question.
Sure.
When you decided to leave your 6-figure consulting business and start Executive Errands, did you have more than 2 nickels to rub together?
I did.
Okay, so you were funded properly.
Well, but here's the thing, and this is going to sound really badly like bragging. So I went and got a loan from Luz, actually. I went and got a $50,000 loan to start my company, thinking I would need it. I never touched that money, not once. In 6 months, I gave it back.
Okay, so let's
I didn't need it.
So. Okay, so let's roll this back for a second. First of all, you had to have good credit. You already had some assets, because otherwise Luz would not have given you a business. You had a business plan, or you wouldn't have been able to probably get that business loan. And then you borrowed money you didn't need, which the banks seem to do that really well. It seemed like when you need it,
they don't want to give it to you.
But when you don't need it, it's like they're. So my point is you were now, let's go back to that example of being in the fire station. You had all the equipment you needed to deal with fires, and you didn't use it. You showed up and said, hey, it's a trash can fire. Let me just put the lid on, smother it, and move on. That's really cool. I want you, if you're listening to this today or watching it, write that down. Are you prepared to make that leap? Do you have the credit? Do you have some money stored away? Do you have the education you needed besides, hey, I know how to spin a wrench? No. Do you know how to run a business? Have you spent enough time in there doing this?
Well, that's the key right there. Do you know how to run a business? I can't tell you how many people I run across who do not know how to run a business.
And that's what, and to me, that's where you say, I'm going to be an apprentice because I want to run my own business someday. So I look at things differently. I have a different eye of intention. Every time I roll into work, I'm looking for different things than just somebody who's punching a clock and getting their check every 2 weeks. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm sitting here thinking to myself, if I didn't already have an appointment at 2 today, I would volunteer to go with you, because I would like to pick this guy's brain and find out what he's thinking, because I work with startups all the time. Right. And I'm always surprised at what they don't know. Right. I don't know why I'm always surprised. It's like we talk about AI, right? We had this conversation the other day. We talk about it so much and we understand a lot about AI that we think everybody understands it, and they don't. And I'm the same way with business owners, because I have so much experience running companies, and I've been blessed to be successful in 2 of my own companies. I feel like it's simple. Everybody should know the steps and things you need to do to be successful, but they don't.
They don't.
And they have good intentions. I mean, like you said, the the road is paved with good intention. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. They have good intentions. I met a lady not that long ago that'd been in business for 15 years, and she was still where other companies I've met are at the 1 and 2 year mark after 15 years of trying to build this company.
Wow.
And there's really no reason for it except she has a lack of capital.
Yeah.
She was more well-versed than most about how to run the business, but she didn't have the capital to do it. And it's not one or the other. I mean, you've got to have some of both. I didn't pay myself the first 5 years, which was a huge mistake for Social Security, but that's another topic, right? I was lucky enough that what I had done is I had liquidated everything I owned when I moved back to California. Sold my house, sold my car, sold all my furniture, sold everything. So I moved here in 2006 with 40 boxes and a bunch of cash in the bank. That was it.
Got a war chest, baby.
I did. And so I had to go buy a car. And, and it was the most free I've ever felt because I rented a furnished place. I had nothing. And it was great because stuff suffocates you. And that's a whole other podcast. It does. It suffocates you.
Tune into episode 37.
It does. It suffocates you when you have too much crap. So I started my business. Now, to be fair, I started my business while I was still working in consulting.
Hello, you made it. That to me is now step 2. Start a side hustle.
Right.
Don't
I did
make
that.
It your primary. Good for you.
And I did that for about 6 months. I did both.
Do you hear what she said? Wait a minute. I don't want to gloss over this.
Yeah.
Because that's the next step is you get the experience, you have the credit, you have some money, and now you still have your job, but you start a side hustle. You start, in this case, you start fixing air conditionings on the weekends, on your days off, and you're not hurting your
build a
your
reputation.
Business on. And you start doing this until the point you say, my side hustle is making as much as my full-time job, which in your case, it sounded like about 6 months. You could then transition, right? No, you weren't making 6 figures, but you were making enough because you didn't have all these financial obligations that you could transition without freaking out, right?
Right. I mean, I kind of had that in the back of my mind. I kept feeling compelled to start my own business. So when the opportunity came up to move, I was living in Dallas at that time, to move from Dallas back to the desert, it made sense to liquidate everything. I didn't want I had a big 4,000 square foot. I had all this stuff. So I just liquidated it all kind of with the idea in the back of my mind that I should start something. Right. And I was working for a consulting company that I still love. It's still out there today. But I was tired of traveling after 10 years and going through 9/11. I just didn't want to get back on an airplane at that time. And I wanted to do something that would be different. That's why I picked service, which is insane. I could have done retail with my eyes closed, but I picked service because I'd never done service. And it wasn't easy. People think, oh, you're successful. How many times, you've known me 15 years. How many times have I said, I can't wait to be successful when technically I already was?
Yeah, exactly.
Because you don't think you are. All of a sudden you look up one day and you go, well, gosh, I'm supporting 6 employees and I have a real office and I'm, making
Company
money and
vehicles and
so that's success by anybody's stretch.
Absolutely.
But again, I had a plan. Did I do a business plan? Absolutely not. I don't believe in business plans. Not to say you shouldn't do one if you have to go for capital.
I'll cut this part out because a business plan was really important to talk about. So I'll cut this out.
Don't cut it out.
I'm just kidding.
It is important for some people. If you're going for investors, you have to have it. There's no question. I didn't have investors. I just worked on my own nickel. Right. And I did basically start on a shoestring, if you think about it.
Didn't you have a plan of some sort? You just didn't wake up to one day and start doing this.
Yeah. Here's my plan. This was my plan. I wanted to build a company. So I knew that I was not building a job for myself. I was building a company, which meant I did not want to do the work that we were going to offer. I wanted other people to do it. And in fact, I never did it for years. I hired somebody the minute I got one client, which is a slower build, by the way, but it's backwards from everybody else. Everybody else works themselves as a solopreneur until they get so overwhelmed that they are forced to hire help. I did not want that. I knew from the get-go I was building a company. I had an image in my mind, right? And as soon as I landed on the name of Executive Errands, I could see the vision of the company. And I also picked a service that I would have paid for when I worked on the road, right? We take care of people's homes and do things for them when they're not here. I would have loved to have had that when I was on the road.
Sure.
Do you know how long my grass got in between visits home? Very, very long.
Code enforcement was waiting for you when you rolled in.
That's right. And my mail would be stacked up to the ceiling, you know, because nobody was there to pick it up. There was nobody there to mow the lawn. It took me like 3 months to get a tire changed on my car one time because I was never home and nobody to do it. So I would have loved to have had a service like this, which is why I started it. So my plan was to create a service that would check people's homes, provide personal assistance, and make their life easier here, right? Because they're not here. They're hundreds and thousands of miles away. So that was my plan. I knew I was going to hire somebody. I knew I was building a business. I knew I had to have marketing collateral that was professional looking, right? So I went out and made that. It was a big investment in the beginning, but you know what? In all these years, in 20 years, I have bought folders. I have logoed folders. I have bought them twice, only 2 times in 20 years, because you have to buy such a big amount to get a price break that they've lasted this time. But I still use them every day, but they just take forever to use up.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had a plan. But the more important thing is that I had the business acumen, right? I have 20 plus years of corporate management experience at the time I started my business. And so people say to me all the time that, I was doing software implementations, business process engineering, training and education, helping people create tools, reporting tools. And they say, well, how could you get from that to what you're doing today? Well, all those same skills apply in a business, customer service, reporting tools, software. I've developed my own software, all those things. So I personally think the most important deal, besides understanding how business works, is that you keep doing it every single day. How many people do you know that aren't willing to go the extra mile and do it when it gets hard?
That's right.
I've been through the real estate downturn with my business. Remember, I started in 2006. I've been through COVID with my business and still here, So when you get to those lean moments, you can't just give up. You have to find creative ways to continue.
True.
Did I get sidetracked too much?
A little bit. I want to bring us back just a little bit. I think all those are input. I want to bring something up that I think sometimes for someone like yourself that has 20 years of success in the bank, we get caught up with the curse of knowledge.
How
and
so?
you talked about this. We think that everyone knows what we already know. So we skip right to we have to decide if you're going to be a business or you're going to work as it's going to be a job for you. I wanted to start way before then, because if they're already in that position, they could already be in failure mode because they've never gotten prepared. Does that make sense? So for you,
keep going.
See, the fact is that you really did. You were starting to have these conversations before the day you told your employer, I quit. You'd already had these conversations in your head for some period of time. You had already started preparing.
6 months.
Yeah, you'd already started preparing for the trip ahead.
Right.
Most people just say, I've had it with my job. I'm quitting. I'm starting my job tomorrow. And they're going, holy crap. Now what do I do? They're not prepared. So
do you know what the worst part of that is, Jeff? Sorry for interrupting you, as I always do. The worst part of that is that the pressure to perform when it's going to be your sole source of income is so high that's one of the reasons I think most people fail. Because when you quit your job because you're frustrated with your boss or for whatever, you're just bored, whatever the reason is, and now you've got to go out and make it on your own. Now you say, because I've asked people that, do you have a second source of income? Right? Because if this is your only thing, if you put all your eggs in this basket and now you have to perform, that's immense pressure.
That's right.
That's too much.
So when I talk about the curse of knowledge, I just wanted to peel back those layers and really get your story before you actually got your business started. You did a lot, but because you remember further ahead in the book, it's like, wait a second, we've skipped a few chapters. Let's go back to the beginning when, you know what, those were those conversations you had, like, okay, I've had enough of this. I've been on the road for 10 years. I'm tired of sleeping in this, in somebody else's bed every night because it's a hotel.
Wait. Oh, I was gonna say,
I just want to clean that up. And I was going to say, and living in a suitcase, you decided, hey, you know what? This isn't for me. I want to do something different. So you started to have that conversation ahead. This is the same conversation you're having somebody out there that you're saying, hey, I've been working with this company now for 5 or 6 years, and I think I'm ready to do this on my own. I think I can do this. But then there's this shift. It's not quit tomorrow. It's like start preparing for the journey today. So when you get out there, and the first time that, you know what, it doesn't rain and you don't have any water, you have an extra bottle of water in your knapsack. You're not going to die. And so that's what Leslie said, is be prepared. Don't go in there saying, it's either make or break. Like, I have to win. Don't be David when the lion is let out, this is your only chance. You're not prepared.
I've seen people go back to a W-2. I always call them, you're going back to a W-2 job because you're working for somebody else. I've seen people do that.
And I want to say,
they start their own business and they go back to the W-2.
Yeah. And I want to make something really, really super clear here. And this is my position only. There is nothing wrong with being an employee.
Oh, no, nothing.
Not a thing. Because you know what? And I've heard, a speaker like Gary Vaynerchuk say, you know what? You're better off at Amazon number 6 or 104 at Google than you are on your own and struggling and hating life. You're better off being an employee. And sometimes you're better off doing that.
Well, yeah, because you don't have that. You can leave and go home and not think about it. Right.
That's right. Clock out and it's there.
You clock out and you're done. You get a paycheck, a regular paycheck every week or every 2 weeks, regardless of whether you think you're being adequately compensated, doesn't matter. Right. The fact is you can rely on that income and it's coming, and you can get health care. I mean, usually you can get health care through your employer. So there are lots of benefit, and they're paying all your taxes and they're paying your Social Security, which is again, really big mistake if you don't pay your Social Security and you're self-employed. So there's a lot of it's just like, one of the things you need to know when you're thinking about going on your own is, do you want to incorporate or not? And I'm not going to get into the details of that, but I'm just going to tell you why you want to, at least in the state of California. There is a self-employment tax. Okay. If you're self-employed and you're not incorporated, you get hit. I don't know what the percentage is, but you get hit with a very big tax at the end of the year called self-employment tax. If you incorporate, you don't have to pay that.
That's right.
Right. And so, because they figure, I guess you're paying your due to the government. I'm not sure which, but you don't have to pay self-employment tax. And generally in this state, at least, you have until February of the following year to get incorporated. So you have a chance to do it. If you talk to your accountant and they say, hey, you're going to have this X amount of dollars, but if you do this, it's less. But you don't know that. A lot of people don't know. It's like my daughter one time went and started a cupcake business because she makes amazing cupcakes. And everybody kept saying, you should start a business. You should start a business.
I think that's why we started this podcast off.
That's right. And when she got there doing it, she hated the business part of it. She don't like to deal with people. Even though she's great with people, she doesn't really like them. She just wants to be making cupcakes in the background. So she actually needs to work at a bakery if that's the case, right? Because she does not want to be front facing to the client. She does not want to deal with pricing. She does not want to deal with invoices or tracking her stuff. She doesn't want to do any of that. Well, that's not somebody who wants to be their own boss.
Well, you have a beautiful program that you talk about puzzles. And to me, it's one of those things. It's like, sometimes when you're only one piece of the puzzle, but you're trying to complete them both, you do hate it. right?
Right.
So sometimes you look out and say, wait a second, who out there would love to be the front man of my business and not have to worry about making cupcakes, but they're the front person and we can work together. That's a nice fit. And
Right.
sometimes that's one of those things where that's a great partnership. And
Right.
a great partnership may be what you're looking for. And one of the things people say is never go into a partnership. Never. But you know
No,
what? When you
I wouldn't.
99% of people don't do it on their own. They've had somebody in their past to help them. It could be a mentor. It could be a partner. Like I had a partner when I first started my business. God rest her soul. She passed away. And I've tried to do that. Now I don't have a partner. But during those partnerships, I learned a tremendous amount from those partners that I still do today. And then I hired Leslie as my business coach, which helps support those gaps in my learning. But the point is be prepared. Don't just say I'm going to go on a 10-mile hike. I don't have a knapsack. I don't have the right shoes. I don't have a hat for the sun.
I
I
don't
don't
have
have a
any
walking
water.
sticky. I don't have shorts. I don't even have a map. And then you wonder why the next thing you hear is someone slapping you because you've passed out on the trail and the helicopter getting you out of the canyon. Don't do that. So
No.
let me just kind of put some things out there. First of all, when you say, hey, I'm destined to have my own business, go work for somebody else. Get that knowledge. Let them pay for it. Instead of going to college and learning, you're actually OJT. You're on the job training. That's the best way you can do, because then you can be inquisitive and you can learn things. And, next thing you know, you could be a manager and you decide, hey, you know what? Now I get to see a different level of this. The other one I think during that period of time is get your credit and your finances in order. Because as Leslie said, don't go out there and this is your only source of income.
It's too much.
Like Leslie said, hey, she had a war chest. She did get the business loan, but she never touched it because she knew what she was doing. And then also begin with the side hustle. I put up here proof of concept, because sometimes when I say proof of concept, it's not the same. Well, Jeff, in this case, an HVAC company, there are HVAC companies. No. The proof of concept is you really want to be the boss.
Right. Yeah. That's huge.
Because excuse the expression, but there's a shitload of stuff you have to do as the boss you didn't have to do as the employee.
That's right. A lot. And I would tell you this real quick. Other part of my startup. I spent the 6 months I worked for somebody else, developing my website, getting my marketing collateral, deciding who my ideal client was going to be, what were my price points going to be. I spent a lot of time planning the business, right? That was planning what I was going to do, checking around, doing the market research to see if there were other companies like mine out there. I didn't see anybody. I was very naive. Okay. I was very naive about that because I wasn't familiar with the desert. I didn't know the right questions to ask. So the day before, literally the day before I started I launched my website, there was a full page article in the lifestyle section of our local paper about this other concierge company.
Wow.
I'm not kidding. It was Christmas Eve. I'll never forget. It was like, I looked at that and my heart just sank. And I thought, why am I doing this? And I could have, and almost did, throw in the towel right then and there and think, well, I'll do something different, because they were a big company. They were like a formal, actual business, not somebody, with a bucket in the trunk of their car. Right. So, but I didn't. And they were gone from, I think, they ended up going out of business around the time the real estate market crashed.
Wow.
I don't know why. I don't know if it was capital. I don't know if it was a lack of service, or maybe their pricing structure at that time, because money was tough. We were so small at that time that I could still get clients because people needed help and I wasn't charging arm and a leg or asking for a big commitment, right?
Yeah.
But they came and went out. And then I've seen over the last 20 years, I've seen a lot of companies come in and leave. And when I say I was naive, it was because it turns out there are real estate agents and housekeepers and even construction people who offer the kind of service we do on the side to help supplement their incomes. However, they don't do it the way we do. They're not they're not corporate. They don't have policies and procedures. They don't have software. They don't have what we have. So we're a high end service for what we do. If you just want somebody to run the water in your toilet, somebody else can do that. We do that, but that's not our primary objective, right? So I just wanted to point out that sometimes, even though you plan, you get thrown a curveball. It was like the universe saying to me, "Are you serious about this?" Because here's somebody else that's doing what you were thinking of doing. But like I said, they're not here, and I am. So doing your market research and having a plan are very, very important. There's also more to building a business than just that. Putting one foot in front of the other every single day, day in, day out. And I will say that small business owners, and I say that word because I have trouble with the E word, the entrepreneur. I can't say it. This is going to be an ongoing
I think
problem.
you did say it. I think you did say it.
Did I say it right?
Yeah, you did.
Is that all of us, I don't care who you are or how successful you are, all of us hit a wall about a year and a half, 2 years in, and every year and a half or 2 years after that. Like, why the hell did I start this business? Why don't I go back to a W-2 where I don't have to think about this? Why don't I just work for somebody else and keep my mouth shut and go home? Unfortunately, if you haven't noticed, guys that watch our podcast, I can't keep my mouth shut. So I'm very bossy. And
She's unemployable.
That's right. Well, now I'm old, so I'm definitely unemployable. But I'm also a control person, right? So, which you don't know. I know you don't know. Don't you say a word. Just stop it. I am a control person. Ask my husband, he will tell you. And I can't work for somebody else because I want to fix everything. So if I go into at this point, if I went into somebody else's company to work for them, I'd be saying, but this isn't right, but this isn't right. And you need to fix your software. You need to do, they would fire me anyway. So, but there is nothing wrong. And I really want to emphasize this in all seriousness. There's nothing wrong with a W-2 job. Mm-mm. There is nothing wrong with going back to it after you've tried on your own and weren't successful. I have had a whole newsletter somewhere about the mindset. What's the entrepreneurial mindset that you need in order to be a small business owner? And not taking no for an answer is part of that, right? I would be very curious. I know we're just about out of time. I would really like if you would do me the courtesy or the favor of talking to this guy when you go to meet with him and find out why he wants to start an HVAC company. Because he's got nothing that I can see from what you've told me.
It sounds to me like it's an act of desperation.
It might be,
but he has that skill set, right?
But it might be. But if you put that negative out in the universe, what happens? If you keep saying I can't afford something, then the universe says, "Oh, it doesn't want to afford it," so they just make it worse. I mean, that's how it works. So I don't know. I'd be curious to know why he's doing it because it doesn't sound like he's prepared at all.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Which is why the whole point of this podcast, right? How do you prepare?
Yeah. So, we've been talking about when to go from a W-2 to an entrepreneur. And, not everybody, but some people will reach that point. They realize, this is not for me. I want to go out on my own.
Right.
We're encouraging you, and I'm pushing harder than ever to say, before you cut your tie with your employer, if you're thinking, hey, I'm a plumber and I've been working for a plumbing company, I think I can do this on my own. Change your mindset and say, give it 6 more months and look at that job with a different set of eyes. I'm going in there to do a great job, but I'm also going in there to learn the business that I could run on my own. And think of it as this is on the job training for me to become an entrepreneur and then start a little side hustle. And while you're doing that, you are putting money away. You're making sure your credit is strong. Everything is good. So you don't start out, because I see this all the time.
Yeah, me too.
When people come to me and I say, well, what's our time frame on this? I need to start making money tomorrow. I'm not your guy.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You know what? If I perform those kind of miracles, my prices would be astronomical and you couldn't afford me.
Can you put this in a jar?
Yeah, no kidding. So
I know. It's crazy. You said something I was going to comment on, but I don't remember what it was. So keep going.
That's okay. So I just wanted to, to put that out as like, hey, work for somebody else, get some knowledge, and then start a side hustle after you get your credit in order. And that's that's like you saying, I'd like to learn how to swim. Let me get in the pool and see if I can do that. Maybe you don't even like the water because go
sorry.
ahead.
Well,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. What I was going to say,
you don't.
You have notes and I don't. That's right. I'm just talking off my elbows. It reminds me of Dan, my husband. He was a tile contractor for 40 years. He installed tile. He had his own business. He did work for somebody else for a minute. Then he got his own business, and he hated the business aspect of it. Right. So he relied totally on word of mouth. He would do a job and he didn't even keep a portfolio of the work, which I think is a huge mistake when you're doing something creative like that. But he did everything wrong. Let's put it that way. He did everything wrong. And so he relied on word of mouth. I don't think you can today like you could in those days, because with social media and with digital everything and with AI and with reviews, which I am woefully got to go get some reviews because I've never focused on that, but I should have. I don't think that you could get as much work as he used to by word of mouth, So if this HVAC guy is he thinks he's going to build a client base off of word of mouth, it will happen eventually, but not as fast as he wants.
I mean, even if he joined a group like BNI, which he financially cannot afford to do,
right?
It would take a minute before he would start getting any business, because those people in the group have to get to know him, like him, and trust him before they're ever going to give them customers and referrals. But we've seen in our BNI group that there's one gentleman in there that gets a tremendous amount of business. I know he doesn't spend a nickel on advertising, but his advertising is spent through the fact that he's in that group. His time is an investment, and he gets a lot of work from that. Now, I don't know how broad his customers are. In other words, he has 100 different clients, or he has 10 clients who actually keep referring, and that's how he stayed busy. I don't know, but he's very well liked, and he's used a lot. I think, and this is now a different type of thing, but this might be a conversation offline, Leslie, is I think about some of our BNI members who are trying to add services to add income. To me, it's like, wait a minute, why don't they connect with you with Executive Earnings? Because you can already fulfill those things, even though they may, and I'm just going to put this, they may be an HVAC company, but once they already have this database of 25,000 names, why wouldn't they offer other things that you offer and take a piece of that action? And everybody wins, because that exposes you to 25,000 new potential customers. Not all of them are, but some of them would be. I just think, what if that synergy is there?
So, well, that's a good thought. I'll write that down.
Yeah. Anyway, so let's wrap up today. So again, we tend to get caught up in the curse of knowledge. We talked about that before when we talked about the digital age and the AI. We think everybody should know that. When we say something, they're going, I've never heard of ChatGPT. And you're like, oh my God, what?
I remember what I wanted to say before we wrap up. I'm sorry, I just remembered. So I had a client who wrote a book, and he had the same kind of we have the same kind of business experience, right? Although he was he owned a paint company that sold for millions of dollars, right? He was just in the right place at the right time, and he wrote a book, a business operating book, and he wanted me to read it and write a test, something in there, right, about the book. I don't know what they call those, but a testimonial, a forward, something. Okay. So I read it, and I thought to myself, and this is honest to God truth, when I was reading it, I'm thinking, oh my God, this is so fundamental. I mean, this is like kindergarten level of business management. I was like, I teach this every day, and way more complex concepts than this. But what I was told when I asked about that to the person who was ghostwriting it for him was that there are lots and lots of people out there that this will be a godsend for, because they have no idea. I always come back to, they don't know what they don't know. And so this will give them a foundation of information that will really help them. I've never forgotten that, because sometimes I get wrapped up in my skirt about making things too complex when it could be just easy. And so I try to remember to do that.
You know, the sports metaphor is let's get good at block and tackling. And on all these motion plays and these trick plays, that's typically what gets too complicated, and that's how we lose the game. So I like what you're saying is we forget sometimes about the simple fundamentals. Closing story for me is this morning I'm playing pickleball with a gentleman, and he's trying to be tricky. And I said, listen, if you break it down to three things, your speed, and that's how fast you get to a shot or how fast you hit it. I said, your patience. And I said, your judgment. I said, if you'll kind of base it on that, what you're doing, I said, we'll have a lot better game. So we played another game together, and he tried some of those things, and we did extremely well because he stopped trying to hit these shots that were not in his wheelhouse. He just went back to block and tackling. So I think that's a great thing to close on, Leslie, is sometimes the basics are exactly what you need. And that's what we've talked about today. The curse of knowledge is one of those things is, go back to basics. And I think you're going to have a heck of a lot better time out there. So again, we were talking about when to go from a W-2 to an entrepreneur. I like to say when to go pro, but we got that confused with the GoPro. We don't want to do that. And I also want to put a little disclaimer in there. We are not accountants. We are not attorneys. We are not finance consultants. These are things that we are sharing from our own personal experience. And we encourage you, if you're going to do any of these things, to then seek a professional. We're just saying, hey, we're in the trenches actually getting mud on our boots. This is how we handle things.
Yeah. I have a vendor who I pay, almost $1 million a year to for service. Not that high, but high. And she's not incorporated. And every year I say to her, you need to go get incorporated. And she's like, I don't want to. And because she doesn't, she's paying a huge amount of that self-employment tax. So for sure, get a good accountant when you're thinking about starting your own business. Jeff's absolutely right.
Brutal stuff. All right, Leslie, that's all I've got today. This is, again, you've joined us on the Twisted, Bent, and Exhausted Entrepreneur Podcast. My name is Jeff Harrison on a company called Swing Point Media. You can get a hold of me at swingpointmedia.com. And with Leslie?
Leslie Spohr, Concierge Business Solutions, which is 3 S's in a row, Concierge Business Solutions .com. And we are here to make your small business journey better. That's the goal.
Thanks, Leslie. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, you guys.